Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita today. Part of my duty as a Swami, so I'm a Hindu monk. I've been a Hindu monk since 2007. And part of my duty is to travel around the world to various countries and to take the teachings of Hinduism. Hinduism is one of the world's religions. And one of the most, let's say, widely known scriptures out of many of the Hindu scriptures, there are literally thousands, and one of the most widely known is the Bhagavad Gita itself. On your tables, you'll find a little card. So in front of you, it will have a little picture. We have a temple in Germany, about 90 kilometers west of Frankfurt. And in the temple, we have many, many paintings. We love to make the pictures of the lives of the divine. So you'll probably have a little picture on the card, a picture of the life of Krishna. And then you'll have a quote. So you'll have one of the verses from the Bhagavad Gita, the translation in English. And on the back side, sorry that we don't have them in Romanian yet. We probably will do in the near future. And then we have a commentary of this specific verse by Paramahansa Vishwananda. So, Paramahansa Vishwananda, he's a God-realized master. He's been traveling around the world for 25 years and giving people the experience of the divine. So what does this mean? A lot of people have been looking for love. As I said before, when I encountered him, I experienced such an incredible love I'd never felt before. It was truly incredible. And he has this ability to give the people the experience of the divinity that dwells inside of themselves. You can read in books, God lives inside of you. It's nice to read in a book. It's nice words. But does it really mean anything to you? When you meet somebody that can give you that direct experience, that can give you that experience of the love of God, the love that God has for you, for some people can be overwhelming. Can be so absolutely incredible and awesome that they don't know what's happening. And so for me, this was one of my first experiences with him that led me on this journey to ask, what does he have to offer? What is he teaching? What is he here for? And essentially, his teaching is what's found within the Bhagavad Gita. So I'm going to go through this. So today here, I'd like to be able to go through the Gita a little bit and tell you about the great power found in the Bhagavad Gita. I'd like to share with you the context of how the Gita came into being. Why was this teaching given? I'd also like to give you the value of the Gita itself, to share with you a few short stories of just how the mere reading of some of the verses of the Gita can literally change your life, change the lives of others. And lastly, if you're interested in picking up a copy, then I can give you some short little tips on how to put some of the teachings that are found in the Gita into practice in your daily lives. So firstly, how did the Gita come into being? Well, we have to go back into the past, about 5,000 years ago. And at that time, a very large Hindu scripture was being written called the Mahabharata. It's 100,000 verses. And from that very large scripture is taken the Bhagavad Gita, which is a tiny, tiny part. It's only 700 verses out of the 100,000. But because the wisdom found within the Gita is so extraordinary, it's been translated into so many languages, and it's been commented by scholars and philosophers on both the East and the West. So it starts with two groups of royal cousins, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So they were living 5,000 years ago in India. And unfortunately, sometimes like in families, they don't see eye to eye. Have you ever had any arguments in your family? No? Please tell me you're human. Yeah, for sure they would say yes. So anyway, they didn't see eye to eye. The Pandavas represented the righteous qualities. They lived very righteously, and they lived according to the laws in society and the laws set down in the scriptures. But their cousins, the Kauravas, they didn't live righteously. They were very unrighteous. In actual fact, they set out to steal everything away from their brothers that was rightfully theirs. And they did. So the Pandavas, they tried to regain what was taken from them. They each had half of the kingdom. And the Pandavas, their half of the kingdom was taken by the Kauravas, and they promised to give it back. But then when the time came for them to give it back, they didn't want to give anything. The promise was broken. And so they had nowhere to live, no way to survive. The only thing that they had to do was try and ask and petition them peacefully, can we have our part of the kingdom back? The Kauravas wouldn't have any of it, and so their last resort was to actually go to war. So the scripture starts with these two groups, the Pandavas. They rallied up an army behind them. They had 1.5 million warriors on their side. The Kauravas, their cousins, they had 2.4 million. So it was pretty much one of the biggest battles, the biggest wars ever humanity's ever seen, that took place in India some 5,000 years ago. All in one battlefield, over a period of 18 days. So this discussion that happens, when you pick up the Gita and you start reading through it, there's a discussion between two people. One of them is Arjuna. He's one of the Pandava princes. And he happens to be pretty much the greatest warrior at that time. He's an incredible archer. And then there's his charioteer, Krishna. Krishna happens to be the supreme manifestation of God. But at the moment, Arjuna doesn't know it. So as the battle starts, in the ancient times when they would start war, they would blow their conches. And this would herald the beginning of the war. So just after the conches were blown, Arjuna says to his charioteer, Krishna, please take my chariot in between the two enemy ranks so he can look upon the enemy that he's going to fight. So Krishna follows. He takes the chariot into the middle of the war setting. And Arjuna begins to look at all the enemies he's going to fight. But because the people in that enemy rank, many of them were his cousins, he also saw not only his cousins, he saw friends, other family members. He saw his grandfather, Bhishma. He saw his guru, Dronacharya. And he was very shocked to understand that war is about to begin. We all know that war is not a nice thing, and death is inevitable. And he was struck with the realization that he might have to kill his beloved family members. So he became very faint-hearted. It was a very difficult process. He was very confused. What shall I do now? I can't fight my family members. No matter what they have done to me, I don't see any reason to kill them. He was very faint-hearted. So one of the verses in the Gita, as I'm going through and doing the talk, I will revert to some of the verses found in some of these chapters. So Arjuna says, even though the Kauravas, my cousins, whose minds are overpowered by greed. How many of us, at some point in our life, our minds have been taken over by this quality of greed? We want more and more. When you was young, did you ever perhaps go into the kitchen when your mother wasn't looking and the purse was on the side and you thought, she won't notice, I'll just take a little bit here and go and buy some crisps in the supermarket? So that quality of greed, when it becomes really inflated, it can be very damaging. So the Kauravas, they were in that state of greed. And Arjuna says, their minds are overpowered by greed, and they see no evil in destroying their family and betraying their friends. Why should we, O Krishna, who do recognize the evil, engage in such sinful deeds? So Krishna was just listening to Arjuna, making excuses as why not to fight. He was in complete distress, emotional meltdown. Now the question is, how many of us have been in that state where you're in that state of emotional meltdown, life's boxed you into a corner and you don't know what to do? You don't know where to go. You're confused. You don't know how to move forwards. It feels so uncomfortable, but yet you don't know what to do. So in this instance, essentially, Arjuna wants to run away. He wants to escape. But running away doesn't really solve the problem, does it? We weren't born to experience life, to run away from it. The only way is through. So if you look in the Gita, there's a lot of symbolism in the Bhagavad Gita. The smaller army of the Pandavas represents the divine qualities inside of us. The larger army of the Kauravas represents all the negative qualities inside of us that we create with the mind, with the ego, and that we hang on to. The eldest of the Kaurava brothers is called Duryodhana, and he represents pride. And when you have pride, I used to have a university lecturer when I was in London, and we used to call him God. Not for all the right reasons, because we could always tell when he was about to enter into the lecture theatre, because his ego would come in 3 minutes before him. He would walk in like this, literally. Look at everybody. And then when everybody would start quiet, then he would start. So in the same way, wherever pride is present, many of the negative qualities will follow. So this is what the 99 brothers of Duryodhana represents, all the negative qualities that manifest in our lives when we have pride. Now Arjuna's grandfather Bhishma, he was actually a very righteous man. And he made a vow to protect the throne that 5,000 years ago. Unfortunately, there was a very corrupt king sitting on that throne. We can have good intentions in our life, but sometimes our good intentions, there's a saying in English, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Now the question is, if we make a good intention, is it to support the right cause? Or perhaps is the good intention used in another manner, which turns out to be destructive, negative? This is exactly what happened to Bhishma. He was very righteous, but he vowed to protect something that turned out to be very unrighteousness. So the battlefield where they were doing the war, where the war was undertaken, it represents the human body. It's called Kurukshetra. Have you ever seen those Tom and Jerry cartoons where Tom is thinking about killing Jerry, the little mouse? He's got his frying pan in his hand, and he's just about to hit this poor little mouse, and then an angel pops up, and the demon. And the angel's going, no, don't do it. And the demon's going, yes, do it. And this is that dialogue that we often have inside of ourselves. We have a conscience. We have that feeling within inside of our hearts. But do we listen to that quality, that feeling? We have that feeling of, yes, this seems to be right. But sometimes we push that to the side and go, no, my desire is too strong. I'm not going to listen to it. So Kurukshetra represents the human body, where this battle of righteousness and unrighteousness is played out. So after 18 days, a long war, let's say, well, for those times, eventually the Pandavas win. But they only win for one reason, because they aligned themselves with Lord Krishna. There was no other way that they could have won. Krishna was an advisor in the war. He stated, I will not fight. So they followed his advice, his instructions, step by step, until eventually they were victorious. Just imagine you're on a war. It's not unrealistic these days, is it? It's on the doorstep. And you're in an army that's half the size of the other. You would be a bit scared, isn't it? A bit worried. What would happen? But if you knew that you had God on your side, would you have that faith and that trust that you could win? This is what the Gita represents. And it tells the story, the beginning of the story, of how Arjuna was victorious. So, at the beginning of the Gita, Arjuna's emotional wreck, he's collapsed on his chariot, he's a complete mess, and Krishna's just listening to him. But Krishna's smiling. So Krishna happens to be the cousin of Arjuna. And he's just smiling, a little smile, whilst Arjuna's an emotional wreck on the floor. Why would he be smiling? Very strange. Because Krishna knows. He knows that his cousin Arjuna, who's one of the world's greatest warriors, is ready to let go. He's ready to stop fighting life. And in that state of desperation where he doesn't know what to do anymore, he doesn't know what's right or what's wrong, he doesn't know how to move forwards, he wants to just run away, he surrenders to Krishna, well, albeit partially, and he says, please instruct me. My mind is confused, I'm bewildered. I no longer know what is right and wrong. Please teach me. I surrender to you. And this is why Krishna was smiling, because he was waiting for this moment. And this is very symbolic. We go through life, we try our own way. Sometimes it doesn't work. We try another way in life, it doesn't work. We try another way, it still doesn't work. And sometimes we go, God, what do you want? And then we start listening. And so here, this is this moment where Krishna is happy because he can see Arjuna is beginning to listen. We cannot truly develop on the spiritual path if we don't have this quality to use the ears. We have to be able to listen. We have to listen to this, to the heart. So God's waiting to come onto the stage to support us in life. So the Gita really starts here with this, let's say in chapter 2, verse 7, where Arjuna surrenders to Krishna and Krishna starts instructing him. Now, when somebody's really depressed in life, I don't know about you, I've been there a few times in life. And when I was really depressed, what did I want to do? I wanted to run away. I didn't want to be around anybody. I didn't like anybody, anything. No humans, please. Yuck. Go away, humans. Give me some space. Not realizing, yes, I'm a human. But the problem was, in that state of depression, of sadness, you're not going to find a solution in that. So what happened was Krishna began to paint a larger picture of life, a larger picture of reality to Arjuna and show him, what's the purpose of life? Why are you here? Who are you really? Are you just this mind, this body, the clothes that you're wearing, the money that you have in the bank, the job that you have? Or are you something much greater? So Krishna said to Arjuna, the self is never born and the self never dies, meaning the soul is never born and it never dies. It has always existed and will never cease to exist. It's unborn, eternal, everlasting, most ancient. Before this universe was created, you existed. So you're very, very old. Perhaps you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s. That's just your body, but your soul is eternal. So Krishna went on to say about how the soul moves from body to body. He said, as a person casts off worn-out garments and puts on new ones, so does the embodied self cast off its worn-out bodies and enter into new ones. So when you came here today, you put on your clothes, your working clothes, you go out, whatever you do, what you're doing. And then when you leave from here, you go home, probably take a shower, put on your pajamas, right? So your day's finished, you'd get rid of those clothes. Very much like the soul, when it enters into a body and the body's finished its purpose, the soul drops the body. It moves on to the next body to experience the next step in eternal life. We think that life is short. Actually, it's extremely long. So Arjuna's in a state of great anguish and despair. And Krishna starts picking him up and showing him a bigger picture, a larger reality to life. And he continues to teach him, how is it possible, even though you're a great warrior, because Arjuna is very concerned, that if he ends up killing any of his family members, he could go to hell. He could commit a great crime, a great sin. In many spiritual traditions, actually, when you die, there's this understanding that you will be judged according to what you have done in your life, what deeds you have done, whether they're good or whether they're bad. So that can be very frightening for some people, to know that God's watching. Where is he? He's always watching me, and he knows what I've done. And their judgment will come. So, what Krishna was trying to show Arjuna, you can do your job, you can do your duty in life. And it's not just a teaching given to him, it's a teaching given to all humanity. Whatever your duty in life is, you can do your work and you can do it impeccably, absolutely perfectly, without incurring any karma, any sin. Now, the difficulty is we're very attached to many things in life. The way that we look, the way that we interact with other people. Do they like us? What do they think of us? Are we doing our jobs well? Are we getting paid enough? And many attachments in life. One day, there was a man, he went into a bar, and he used to like going into this bar. So he would go in, order a beer, and he would sit down in the corner of the bar. And on that same day, a lady came into the bar, and she ordered a glass of wine. She sat at the bar, and he was watching from a distance. He was drinking his beer, and he was just admiring. Wow, she's nice. And then she finished her wine, she left. So the next day, the man was thinking, he goes to the bar again, he orders his beer, he sits down in the corner, and he's waiting. I wonder if she'll come again. So she arrives, just like the previous day. She sits at the bar and she orders her wine. So this goes on for a few days, and the man is just a bit too nervous. He, he's admiring from a distance, and he's always, wow, she's so beautiful, wow. So the next day, he picks up the courage, and he's thinking to himself, if she comes in today, I'm going to talk to her. You ever had that? When you admired somebody very much, and your heart was racing a little bit? I thought, okay, this one's the one. This one's the one for me. So maybe you tried. Maybe you didn't try. Maybe it worked out. Maybe it didn't work out. Anyway, so she walks into the bar, and he walks up to her. And he goes, let me guess, you would like a glass of wine? She says, yes. She's pleasantly surprised. So they sit down at the bar, and they start chatting. And he starts confiding to her. He says, I've seen that you come here often. And she says, yes. He says, I've been sitting here in the bar and I've been admiring you. He says, you're very beautiful. And she's liking the compliments. The ears love the compliments. Flattery will get you everywhere. So she's enjoying the compliments from the man. So she finishes the wine. He finishes his beer. She says, why don't you come back to my place? So the man's thinking, great. Good news. This is going well. So they go back to her place. And he sits on the sofa. She brings him a beer. She sits on the sofa next to him. She has her wine. And she's talking to the man, and she says, so tell me, how much did you love me? Tell me. And he said, well, yeah, I have to confess, I really love you. I've been admiring you, and I have to say, your hair is beautiful. It's so glossy and long and silky. She smiles, and she just runs her hands through her hair, and then she takes the hair off, and she puts the hair on the table. And the man is shocked. What? She's bald. There's no hair on her head. It's on the table. He can't believe it. And he's just looking at this bald head. So she breaks him out of this. She says, so tell me, how much you liked me? And he was like, yes, well, yes. I love your eyes. You have beautiful eyes. And she smiles, flatters her eyelids at him. And she takes the eyelids, eyelashes, she puts them on the table next to the hair. Again, the man is a bit surprised. What's going on? So the lady asks him again, So tell me again, how much you love me? And the man was not sure. He was a bit hesitant. But he said, well, I do love your smile. You have a beautiful smile. So she flashes him a beautiful smile. And she does have a very nice smile. And then she puts her hands in her mouth. She takes the teeth out and she puts them on the table, next to the eyelashes and the hair. And then she says, how much do you love me? The man, he just looks down. He just looks down. He doesn't know what to do. All that attachment to that image that he had in his mind, this was the one. She's got all the right curves in the right places. She's got the nice hair. She's got the beautiful eyes. She's got the nice smile. All that was destroyed. And that attachment that he had into his mind of what, this is the love I'm looking for, was finished. He just looked down. He was so, depressed. He just stood up and he left. He walked out of the flat. That was a true story. It was written in a Spanish newspaper. So the thing is, there's a lot of attachments that we have in life, like ideas. Yeah, this is the kind of person I want. A friend I had in America, she was in her late 30s, and she hadn't found the right man. And I said, well, what kind of, have you dated any men? And she says, yeah, I never found the right one, never fulfilled all the requirements. I said, well, what kind of requirements do you have? And she showed me the list. The list was about this long, and it had about 40 points on it. Has to be 6 foot, maybe a six-pack, earns about at least 100,000 a year, drives a certain kind of car, has a house, might have children, but they're all left. They're at university, so I can have time with him. And this list was pretty exhaustive, you know. So we have so many ideas, attachments in our minds, in life. But how many people are really prepared to love without any condition? That's a question. Very, very few. The problem is it's because the way that we've been brought up, the way that our mind has been conditioned since we were very young. We've been shown lots of adverts on the televisions. We've been reading the magazines, shown what we should do, how we should be, told what we should and shouldn't do. And this becomes ingrained, impressioned into the mind. For saints who have learned to master their minds through a process called karma yoga, which is described in the Gita, there's no desire for them for life to be this way or that way. They're content with life on life's terms. They perform all of their actions in life without any expectation. How many of you do your job because of the money? Come on, be honest. A few, okay? How many of you do your job because you get some other incentives? A few more, okay? How many of you do your job just for the sake of doing it, without any expectation? Thanks for being honest. So, we'll come back to this performing or doing your jobs, your duty in life without expectation in a little bit. So Krishna was challenging Arjuna at the beginning of the Gita to let go of his limitation, let go of his ideas, his thoughts about life, how life should be, because it hinders us from moving forwards in life, taking up that strength and accepting life on life's terms and actually moving forwards without any fear. Wouldn't that be wonderful? To live a life without fear? How many fears do we have in our life? Fear of not being able to pay the mortgage, fear of divorce, fear of not having enough money. Many basic fears. But what Krishna is trying to do is trying to challenge the mind. Now, if the mind isn't challenged, if our mind isn't challenged, will how you think, will how you perceive the world change? No, it won't. Unless somebody challenges the way that you think, you won't step back and then analyze, reflect, and think, actually, Let's look at that. When you reflect, you step back and you think, you analyze yourself, you have a greater understanding of yourself, greater self-awareness, and that helps you to be able to take those steps forwards into life. So Krishna urges Arjuna to apply this form of yoga, karma yoga, in life. And it's a form of yoga that anybody can do. If you're at school, if you're at work, if you pay the bills, if you have friends, family, you like to go on holiday, whatever the circumstances of life are, if you live in the world, you can perform karma yoga. Most people think they can only do yoga if they go to yoga class, or you wear spandex and you have to do some crazy, you have to be able to, scratch your ear with your left foot or something like this. That's not required. There are many forms of yoga. And this is a form of yoga that anybody can perform. So if one is able to perform karma yoga, one is able to come to that level where they're able to control the mind and detach from the actions that they're performing in life. When the mind is controlled and the mind rests in that state of peace, then that desire doesn't enter in. Yeah, maybe I'd like to get the promotion. I've been working here for 6 months. My boss doesn't recognize my potential. There's not that desire entering in. So if saints who've mastered the mind, they perform all the actions in life without desire, you might ask, well, why do they do what they do? If they don't desire to do their job anymore, why do they get out of bed in the mornings? Why do they go to work? They do it for the benefit of others, purely. That's the reason why they do it. In Hinduism, we have this saying, loka sangraha, meaning for the benefit, for the welfare of everybody. So Krishna says, chapter 3, verse 25, just as the ignorant act with attachment to their work, so should the wise act without any attachments, thinking only for the welfare of the world. So for people who live in the world, there is a way to become completely free. To create that inner stillness, to become free from desire that enters into the mind, fear, anxiety, pressure from other people. Wouldn't that be wonderful to be able to be completely free in one's life? Devoid of fear. That's possible. And Krishna gives the steps, the methodology on how to attain that. So such saints live in the world, they have nothing to gain, but yet they function just purely for the benefit of others. That's unconditional love. It's unconditional service. Whatever service comes into their life, they'll perform that service to whomever, whenever, wherever they're serving. And they don't expect anything back. How many of you are servants? All of you. You all serve in some form or fashion. You serve your friends, your family, your girlfriend, your auntie, your uncle, your grandparents. You serve the person that comes to you at work. We're all servants in some form or fashion of life. And so this yoga, karma yoga, enables servants to be able to perform their service perfectly without any fear or concern. So there's one nice story on when one reads the Gita, the power that it has to transform. Now in Hinduism, we have, let's say, 3 deities that are responsible for the creation, the maintenance and the destruction of the universe. We have Lord Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, and Shiva, the destroyer. So Shiva was having a conversation with his wife, Parvati, and he said, the glory of this chapter, the chapter of Karma Yoga, is the 3rd chapter in the Gita, which Lord Krishna has given, dissolves all of one's sins in life. And one realizes the essence of service, of sacrifice. So he said, in a certain village lived a man by the name Jara. And Jara, due to his past karma, Jara was born in a very good family. He'd done lots of good things in his previous life. But he was very wicked and selfish. He was very greedy. And he would always think about amassing more and more wealth. Always thinking about himself. Even though he got a good education, his mind was just on himself, amassing money. And he would pray to get material things all the time. God give me this, God give me that. And whatever he would do was only for himself. He didn't think about anybody else. So due to his past karma, he was born into a wealthy family, and he had lots of money, but it was never enough. So he became greedy, and there were some thieves who had been observing him, his wealth. And they were, let's say, they were stalking him. And one night they broke into his house when he was there. They attacked him and stabbed him, and he died. They stole many things, and they left. His son wasn't in the village at that time. And he had his son, he was called Mada. Now when he returned, he saw his dead father, and he was very, very upset. He was mourning, he was grieving, he was crying. And he performed all the, let's say, the sacred rites so that his father could pass on in a peaceful manner. But when he used to sleep at night, Mada would see his father's soul, Jara. He would come to him, his spirit would come to him, and he would be very, very distraught. He would be suffering a lot. And he said, Father, in his dream, well, I've done all the sacred rites for you, so you can pass on in peace. But yet, you're suffering so much. What is wrong? And he couldn't figure out why these services were not working. So he was at a friend's house, and he was telling his friend. And his friend said, let's meditate and read the Bhagavad Gita. Let's read what Lord Krishna has said about how one has to live in life and in that state of surrender, service. So they read the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, for 21 days consecutively. They read it, meditated on it. On the night of the 21st night, when Mada was at home, suddenly he saw a bright light in the house. And from this bright light, the voice came. It was his father's voice. And his father said, my child, since you have read and you have meditated on the Gita, the chapter which Lord Krishna has given, you've freed me from all of my sins, all of my karma in this life. But I request one last thing. He said, in this life I didn't do anything good. I didn't do anything for others. It was always for me. Carry on reading this chapter to free all of our ancestors from hell. So Mada, he was very, very moved because he could see that his father attained that freedom, that incredible joy, that light. And he was overtaken with so much love. He said, yes, Father, I will do this to free our ancestors. So just the mere reading of the Gita can purify you of a lot of what we term in Hinduism karma. In Christianity is termed sin. So what happens when we perform actions and we're very attached to them, to the outcomes? We incur a consequence, and that we may have to pay that consequence at some time later in this life or another. So this is the ideology of karma. So just the mere reading of the Gita can purify you from a lot of karma, from many lifetimes. And this is what is the idea. Mada was praying for his ancestors. He was reading the Gita and offering this for his ancestors. This is selfless service. This is service for others. It wasn't for himself. This is when one acts for the welfare of everyone, for the benefit of everybody. But to be able to do that, you have to be strong. You have to be able to control your mind. And that's not so easy to do. To just focus on serving others without thinking of oneself. Isn't it? You help some other people, and then behind there's a little bit of like, well, I helped him, maybe he should help me. You know, last week his car broke down, and I helped him out, I gave him my spare tire. So, you know, when I'm in need, he should be there for me. There's always a little bit of expectation in the back. That's not so easy to do, to be able to render service without any expectations. That's where one has to learn to control the mind, to pull that expectation back. So, controlling the mind is not an easy thing. I remember in 1991, it was the summer, very hot, and Bryan Adams released his hit single, "Everything I do it for you." And it was a great single. I really loved it. I thought that was Bryan Adams then. He's coming. So nothing against Mr. Bryan Adams, but that single went on to be number 1 in the charts for 16 weeks. And that song was playing in every car, in every restaurant, on every radio. And after at least 8 weeks, whenever I turn off the car radio, I turn off the radio in the restaurant, still the song was going through my mind. Everything I do it for you. And it was like Japanese water torture. You know, it's having Bryan Adams dripping on me in my mind every day. Mental torture. And with karma yoga, we learn to control the mind. Our minds are very, very difficult to control. Even Arjuna says this to Krishna. You know, he says, our minds are fickle, turbulent, powerful and stubborn. It's more difficult to control my mind than the wind. And Arjuna, you know, he's very distraught. How can I control my mind? Krishna says the mind is undoubtedly chaotic and hard to subdue, so hard to control. But by repeated practice and renunciation, it can be brought under control. It is possible to control your minds. So what happens when the mind is completely calmed? When your mind becomes into that very calm state, that very, very quiet state, something awakens inside. Some people call it the higher consciousness. It's a level of consciousness that lies dormant inside of you. When your mind goes into complete silence, the consciousness is awakened. And that begins to become active. And through that, one begins to perceive the divinity inside of you that perhaps you haven't seen for many lifetimes. So some years ago, Paramahansa Vishwananda was running a silent retreat in the ashram in Germany. So I'm from Germany. He has his international ashram there. And it's a retreat about cultivating this quality of inner silence, so calming the mind. And during the week, Paramahansa Vishwananda said, for those that are ready, they will receive the experience of pure consciousness. So during those days, something really incredible happened. Something before took place inside of me that I'd never experienced before. My mind went completely silent, absolutely silent. There was no movement whatsoever. But yet, there was still a watching, a perceiving. There was still an awareness that was taking place. And suddenly I could see a light, an extremely, extremely bright light. And a bit like these lights. And the light was radiating from this focal point of light. And as the light was radiating, so many qualities started coming through. A love that I'd never experienced before, apart from when I met him. An incredible divine love. A love greater than your lover, your best friend. And also this other quality that came with the light was this quality of friendship. It was a friendship that was much, much, much deeper than the friendship that you have with your best friend, your mother, your father. Your soul has had 8.4 million incarnations before you became a human. This is what it says in the Hindu scriptures. And then after that, you can go through hundreds of thousands of incarnations as a human being before you reach complete freedom. And just imagine if you could perceive your soul in every lifetime, being there, inwardly guiding you, and you could perceive that level of friendship. Another quality that came with that light was that feeling of eternity, absolute eternity. Nothing could touch that. Nothing can come close to that. Nothing can tarnish that state of eternity. It was absolutely phenomenal. And it was burnt into my consciousness, this experience. Even if I tried to forget it today, I couldn't. It's not possible. It's there. It's like if somebody takes a brand and burns you, you can't get rid of that. It's in you, it's part of you. So the divinity of the self does exist, but yet it's only for those who have learnt to control the mind completely. And through controlling the mind, it's possible to perceive that divinity. But I had that ability due to his grace. He gives this opportunity to many, many people. They meet him. I once was in Portugal, and Paramahansa Vishwananda was giving darshan. And as I was sitting, I was sitting in the music corner, the musicians were playing, and I saw these two guys coming up the queue. So there would be a queue coming up, and they would sit in front of Paramahansa Vishwananda, and he'd give them blessing. He would look into their eyes, and he'd put his hand on their head. And these two guys were Hell's Angels motorcyclists, big guys. They got the denim, they've got the studs, they got the beards, they got all the big tattoos. And I was thinking, these guys are not spiritual. What are they doing here? So they was going up in the line. So I turned around and I was watching them. I was playing the manjuris. And I was watching them go up to get their darshan. I was thinking, this is going to be interesting. So one of the guys, he's taking his darshan from Paramahansa Vishwananda. He starts moving like this. And I'm thinking, wow, he's having a Kundalini experience. I thought, wow, maybe he's more spiritual than I thought. Complete judgment on my side, complete judgment. But then when he turns around, his beard is wet with tears. That love that he opened inside of him, he just revealed that divinity inside of his own heart. It was such a power that this Hell's Angels motorcyclist, a man that I thought was, hard as nuts, rock hard, he felt that love. And his beard was already wet with tears. And that divinity that's inside, it can have such an impact on our lives. It can change us just like this, in a fraction of a second. So this divinity does exist, but the mind needs to be controlled, and it's not easy. So Krishna says, when the mind is detached from external sensations, one finds happiness in the self, in the soul. And when through yoga the mind is present on the Lord, on God, one enjoys endless bliss. It's not just joy, it's bliss. It's greater than joy. So such yogis, these spiritual sages, they begin to see not only the divinity inside of themselves, they perceive it inside everybody else. So they see it doesn't matter if you're black or white, man or woman, if you're rich or poor, if you're a criminal, or if you're an upright citizen. When they look at you, they look deeper than that, and they see the same divinity shining inside of you with all of these divine qualities. Very, very beautiful. But they see also what's layered over it. They see the mind, all the desires, the ego, all the fears. So, in the same way, Krishna is helping Arjuna to come to that point of experiencing that divinity inside of him. And the steps that he's given to Arjuna are also there for all humanity. Anybody who wishes to take those steps just have to pick up the Gita and put it into practice. So he's been dropping hints, Krishna, also about the divinity of himself and who he actually is. But in the early chapters of the Gita, where it talks about karma yoga for the first 6 chapters, then we move forwards and the narrative in the Gita begins to change vastly. And Krishna starts to talk about himself as the supreme being, as God himself. And he talks about, first of all, himself, his lower aspect. And he says in chapter 7, verse 4, earth, water, fire, air, ether. So these 5 elements are used to create everything. All types of inanimate matter, everything that we can experience in the cosmos. But he goes on to say mind, intelligence, and the ego. These are his 8 parts of his lower nature. So he gives him a little glimpse of his lower aspect. But what about his higher aspect of God? He says, there is, however, another unmanifest realm which is superior to the manifest place of the material world. It is eternal and does not get destroyed when all other living beings pass away. So there is an eternal realm which is beyond this universal existence. The Big Bang happens, everything comes into being, and then gravity takes over and it implodes. And then the Big Bang happens again. It expands, then it implodes, and it goes on and on and on. Krishna wanted to give Arjuna the experience on the battlefield of only a tiny fraction of himself. He wanted to give Arjuna this understanding of this universe. And he wanted to see himself in relation to everything. Because sometimes in life, when we find ourselves stuck, we don't understand why we're here, where we're going, what's the purpose of life? Sometimes we need a bigger picture. So Krishna gave him that bigger picture. He helped Arjuna to experience everything in the totality of this universe. And it was still just a fraction of himself. Krishna said, with just a fraction of myself, I sustain this whole universe. And Arjuna says, in that cosmic form, Arjuna saw the entire universe with all of its divisions situated in one place, all within the body of God. So he was saying that there are many universes present within the body of God. God is so vast. There are many universes, not just one, there's many, all present within the divine, within the ultimate, the supreme being. And God is much more vaster than we could ever imagine. But Krishna wanted Arjuna to understand that God is in control of all of this, absolutely everything. We think that we're in control of our lives, but do you know what's going to happen tomorrow? Whilst you're sitting there in your chair, are you making yourself breathe, or is it happening naturally? Are you making your heart beat, or is it taking care of itself? Everything has its divine timing. Everything's under the control of the divine, whether we perceive that or not. And so God being in control has brought many souls into this experience of the universe, to experience all types of limitation. I don't have enough love. I don't have enough girlfriends. I don't have enough boyfriends. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time for myself. Or maybe I'm too rich. I don't want to be noticed. I'm too famous. There's so many types of limitations in life, and the souls come in to experience every form of limitation so that eventually it can transcend this universal realm and return back to where it came from. But the method to break free of these limitations and this, let's say, conditioning is through the process of karma yoga. But then Krishna goes on to talk about another form of yoga, where dhyana yoga, he says you have to control the mind by performing meditation and focusing the mind on the divinity inside of oneself. He goes on, after talking about dhyana yoga, he goes to talk about bhakti yoga. He says, focus your mind on me, be devoted to me, offer worship to me, bow down to me. Engaging your mind in this way, holding me as the supreme goal, you will surely come to me. So when the mind has been focused completely on the divine, it sounds a bit hard, but I think all of us have our pet hobbies in life. When I was young, I was into Transformers. All I wanted was an Optimus Prime. When I was a bit older, I was into fishing. All I wanted was to catch a nice big bass, this big, on the beach, and I would be dragging my father out at 10 o'clock in the night on the cold winter nights to go fishing. When I was a bit older, I was into cars. Oh, I love this car. I'd love to have a Ferrari. And all my focus was on the Ferrari. Did I get the Ferrari? No. But you know how it is. When you want something, you focus on that purely. The mind is, I want this, I want this, I want this. If one has that sincerity to really want the divine, the mind is focused. I want God, I want God, I want God, I want God. This is what happens with the saints. Once somebody asked God, why are saints saints? And God said, because they know what they want. They keep asking for the same thing, me. So Krishna, the Supreme Being, God, he said, when I see somebody that has sincerity, he helps them. He helps that person to develop that relationship with the divine. He says in chapter 10, verse 11, out of compassion for them, for those saints who are truly working on their relationship with God, from within their hearts, I lift the lamp of knowledge and dispel the darkness born of ignorance. So when one is earnestly developing their relationship with God, God who's seated within their hearts, he will reveal himself. Now the doors of our heart may be rusty. The hinges haven't been used for many, many years. And so God has to push hard from the inside. He's maybe even banging and you don't hear it. You're just on the outside. You're busy looking the other way. You're looking at that Ferrari. You want the Ferrari. And you don't hear God banging from inside. But God, if one is looking inward and God is inward, he pushes those doors and he appears from inside. It's possible that one can actually perceive God himself sitting within your own heart. So there are many books about finding God within, but ultimately, it's up to you to put that into practice. The Gita is one of the ways in which you can follow the steps to be able to attain the knowledge of the self, to attain the divine. But you have to do that work for yourself. You can't be lazy and sit around. I wanted to leave you with two stories. The first is a story, both of the stories were told by Paramahansa Vishwananda. The first story is called The Three Mistakes. There is a Sufi saint who said, when I got enlightened, I realized I had made 3 mistakes in life. The first mistake I made was that I always thought that I was taking the first step towards God. But actually, after enlightenment, I realized that it was not me who had taken the first step, but it was God. Long before I had taken that first step, he had already taken many steps towards me. The second mistake was I thought that I loved him immensely. Afterwards, I realized that my love was just a drop compared to his ocean of love. And the third mistake was when I attained him and I realized him. Actually, it was only him that realized himself. It was not me who attained him, but he who made it possible that I attained him. So try to understand these things. These 3 things show that all is the grace of God. And of course, to attain his grace, one can't be lazy. One has to be actively working. The second story is the heart's prayer. Once a saint asked the Divine Mother, "Mother, why? When we are in danger of death and we call for the divine, why do we receive the help instantly, straight away? But normally when we pray, the help takes longer." The Divine Mother replied, "When you are in danger, you don't think about it, and the prayer comes directly from your heart. When the prayer comes directly from your heart, it's answered also very, very quickly. The help is always there. Whatever comes from the heart is even faster than your mind can think. But very often, whenever you pray or ask for help, you have to think about it. You have to fashion words inside, thinking that they need words. You can be a great poet and have a great vocabulary, but if it doesn't come from your heart, it's nothing. So this is one thing that I would like to leave you with, is there is an incredible power within your heart, within inside of yourselves. And that is that divine love that exists inside each one of you. And that divine love can be awakened when it's focused on God himself. He will run to you and he will reveal that divinity inside of your own hearts. So, at the end of each day, I'm just going to give you a few tips if you want to put into practice some of the teachings found in the Gita. If you want to live in such a way where, when you end your life, all the errors, all the sins that are committed are completely wiped clean. At the end of your day, you sit on your bed before you go off to sleep, and you just rewind through your day, and you just think everything that's happened, whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. You think of everything, and you say, Krishna Arpan. Krishna Arpan means I offer it to the Supreme Lord. I offer it to Krishna. So everything that happened in your day, you mentally think, I offer this to God. By offering your day, everything, all of your actions, to the divine, it cleanses everything. Secondly, try to practice meditation. Just sit for 5 minutes. How many of you use the toilet every day? Wow, some of you you need a doctor. Okay, I don't believe you. So, I'm sure you all do. So, when you go to the toilet, just take the opportunity to sit, close your eyes, and think of the divine. Think of the divine. Just a few minutes. When you go home, take 5 minutes, sit, think of the divine. You don't have to be great meditators, but just think on God. There was once a businessman who came to our ashram, and Paramahansa Vishwananda helped him to resolve some problems in his life, his problems with his business. And the businessman was very happy that the problems had been solved. So he said, let me repay you. He said, let's be reasonable. Let's start with 20 million. So he wrote a check for 20 million euros. And he gave it to my guru. My guru took the check, and he started ripping up the check. And the businessman was shocked. What's he doing? This is money. This is 20 million. Why is he doing this? And Guruji, he said, I don't want your money. Obviously not. Otherwise, why would you rip up a check? But he said, there's something I do want you to do. And the businessman was very confused. Because if you don't want money, well, what other business do you want? That's how businessmen work most of the time. It's money. So he said, there's something that you can do for me. So the businessman was very concerned. What? And he said, I would like you to pray for 5 minutes a day to God. And the businessman, he said, what? Pray to God? No, I don't even believe in God. I can't pray to God. And he said, just 5 minutes. And he was like, and he sat down, and he was having a real big process. He would have rather given him the 20 million. It was much easier. And he was struggling with this. Oh, pray, I've never prayed. And then he thought, okay. After about 5 minutes of sweating, going through a process, the businessman said, okay, all right. And they made the deal. And he left. We never saw him again. I don't know if he's praying 5 minutes every day still, but Guruji was very happy with him because he was just focusing on his relationship with the divine. And for him, that meant much more than 20 million. Another easy tip that you can put into practice is take 15 minutes of your day, perhaps when you go to work, or you're at home with the children or the family, and just think, okay, within the next 15 minutes, whatever actions I perform, I'm not going to be attached to them, or I'm going to try not to be attached. And just watch the clock. So your boss comes along, asks you for something, and you look to see, am I attached to doing this or that? Or my wife nags me, turn off the football. Yes, okay, whatever. Oh yeah. I'm attached to watching the football. Okay, no problem. Bloop. Off goes the football. So there's many small things in the way we get attached to things. If we can learn to just bring in 15 minutes of learning how to detach from life's circumstances, can help us to become more focused. And that 15 minutes can become 20, half an hour, an hour. And then that can revolutionize the way that we live on a day-to-day basis. So I hope you've found the talk educational. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer if anybody has. Mayatita, do you have a question? Okay, no. Okay, then thank you very much, Jai Gurudev.